All right, we got 5 minutes on the clock. What is your name, sir?
My name is Ewell Smith. I am from New Orleans, and I am the host of the closethedeal.com podcast.
Awesome. Today, we're going to be talking about why you're going to start a business. Why should you start a business related podcast, right? So if you're in the world of business out there and you're thinking about, should I start a podcast or not? That's why we had Mr. Ewell on the show. So what is your thoughts? Why should you start, or why did you start a business podcast?
Well, I'll tell you, I first learned about podcasting right after the BP oil spill. I was head of the Louisiana Seafood Promotion and Marketing Board, and we were taking media calls from across the globe dealing with it. And then I had one guy come up and said he wanted to do a podcast interview. My answer was, what's a podcast? So I learned about podcasting back then, but I didn't do it till recently. But I remember I call it the power of podcasting, because you get to connect with so many people. It's a great connector. And if you're in business, that we use podcasts and media back then to tell our story to the world, to let people know the seafood was safe, come back and enjoy Louisiana seafood. But for a business, it's an unbelievable tool. It gives you access to people you would never dream of meeting to do podcasts, interview people, have conversations with people. And that's the part I love. That's where I think the real power of podcasting comes in, is because you're connecting with others.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. So it started for you as a mission driven thing. We're going to use media to let people know this,
correct,
the food safe, come back to New Orleans.
That's right.
And then one day you had this brilliant idea is, I'm in the world of business brokering and franchising. Why not start a podcast? So talk to me about the day you had that idea, because you have a great domain. What's your domain?
The domain is closethedeal.com. And I actually put it in the name of the podcast. I call it the closethedeal.com podcast, not the Close the Deal podcast, the closethedeal.com podcast. I want people to remember that, hear it over and over and over. So I bought the domain many years ago. I ran trade associations for nearly 2 decades. So I sat on the domain for many years. And then I said, you know what? I came back to that conversation with the guy with podcasting 10 years ago. I said, it's time I do this. This is crazy. I should be doing this. And I actually started a little pilot podcast, a few episodes, just to see if I liked it. And when I realized, and I didn't like it, I loved it, I said, I'm going to use this domain now, closethedeal.com. So I put up the domain, and the domain obviously lends a level of credibility. So people started reaching out to me organically to be on the podcast. I'm like, okay, I've got something. So then the franchising piece just made a natural transition to add that, bolt those two together. And I was interviewing entrepreneurs. Now I'm interviewing entrepreneurs and franchisors. And it's just a natural progression.
So this became a part of your sales funnel, because if you cold call people all day long, you're going to get a lot of no's. Now people are coming to you.
That's right.
Saying, I'm a business owner. I'm a franchise. Could I be on your show?
Mm-hmm.
What changed in your business model after you incorporated the podcast?
Well, people start reaching out to you for not just to be on the show, but they all start reaching out to figure, how can we collaborate with you? Or we would like to sponsor your show. I just started getting calls for that. I'm relatively new, right?
That's
I just
awesome.
got my first email with somebody wanting to collaborate and pay money to be a sponsor. So that's the beginning. Yep. And that's how this grows. And it takes time. It takes work. You know that. Mm-hmm. And I know the possibilities of this because I've seen the power of the media. And this is just a platform that really has tremendous potential if you stick with it and grow with it. But it takes some time and some work to put into it, for sure.
For sure. Now, how long ago did you start your podcast, and you just got a sponsorship proposal? How long ago did you start?
I started, I was only doing I was still working in the trade association world. So I was doing it on the side. I was only doing 1 episode a month, but I was getting great guests. I've had some fantastic guests who are kind of well known. And I'm like, I've got something here. So it's about 1.5 years. So I was just doing 1 show a month. I'm like, no, I got to start doing it. So now I'm trying to go weekly. Nice. And I'd like to get even more frequent than that, to be quite candid.
10 seconds left. Name your show one more time.
The closethedeal.com podcast. Closethedeal.com.
Awesome. Guys, check out his podcast. Make sure you subscribe, give him a raving review. And if you're a franchise or someone in that industry, want to be on a show, closethedeal.com podcast.